I want to be clear, for the record, that I am not a hero. I stayed because of the barometric array. That's it. The Kareth Flats depot had a Type 9 atmospheric monitoring cluster bolted to the processing roof, and if you let a Type 9 go into emergency shutdown during a Category 6 pressure event without manually cycling the buffer relays, it corrupts 18 months of survey data and also, not incidentally, catches fire. I was the only person on the depot who knew how to run the cycle. So when Chief Administrator Pol Verath got on the evacuation horn and told everyone to get to the crawler bay, I told him I'd be 20 minutes behind the convoy. That was, I will admit, optimistic. The storm came in off the Kareth shelf like something with a grudge. I got the relays cycled. I did not get out. I made it to the sub-level maintenance corridor, pulled a blast door shut behind me, and spent the next 4 hours listening to a Frontier processing depot being turned inside out over my head. When it was done, I climbed back up through what remained. The depot looked like it had been chewed and spat. The processing gantry was gone. The fuel transfer lines had been sheared off at the couplings, and the storage units had rolled 50 meters across the flats, which I hadn't thought was physically possible. The crew quarters were still standing because they were built into the rock shelf, but the windows were gone and the interior was full of gray moon dust and twisted conduit. The barometric array, I am pleased to report, survived. I had my priorities. I was picking through the ground floor of the processing floor when I heard it. Not a sound, exactly. More of an absence. A shift in the way the silence was sitting. I've been doing atmospheric survey work for 19 years, on 11 moons, and you develop a sensitivity to wrongness, the way a pressure differential feels before it registers on the gauges. Something in the sub-level was not the same as everything else. I found a survey drum, one of the big sealed cylinder containers we use for atmospheric sample collection, rated to withstand 80 kilopascal differential. It had been wedged between two structural pillars in the lowest maintenance bay, braced with loader chain on both sides. Not thrown there. Placed there, with a great deal of deliberate care, by someone who knew exactly what a Type 9 pressure event was going to do to an unprotected space. The seam was not quite flush. I stood there for a moment with my pry bar and thought about the last crew rotation. Thought about the Vorin resettlement camp out on the Kareth shelf edge, the one that had been there for 2 seasons, the one that kept getting told their processing status was pending. Thought about the 3 Vorin maintenance workers on my own crew, who had been in the evacuation convoy, who had families in that camp. I opened the drum. She was very small, ash-gray skin, the color of weathered slate, with a faint blue undertone across the cheekbones, enormous dark eyes, the kind that take up more of a face than seems structurally advisable, pupils blown wide in the sudden light. She was wrapped in an insulated survey liner and tucked into a coil of atmospheric sample tubing, like a very precisely stored piece of equipment. She looked at me. I looked at her. Right, I said. She didn't speak. Vorin children that young generally don't. Not in any language I'd recognize, but she tracked me when I moved, and she reached out one hand. 4 fingers, the joints slightly wrong compared to what I was used to, the skin over the knuckles very thin, and put it against my forearm. I picked her up. She weighed about as much as a full sample canister. She let me. I carried her up to the crew quarters, cleared a bunk, and spent the next 2 hours doing a rough order inventory of the depot's surviving supplies while she sat on the bunk and watched me with those enormous eyes. I found a case of hydration concentrate and some emergency ration blocks. The ration blocks were the pressed grain variety, which even I find borderline inedible. But she ate 2 of them with the focused seriousness of someone who had not eaten recently and was not going to be precious about it. I tried to reach the convoy on the comms. The dish was gone. I tried the emergency beacon. It was transmitting. But in this sector, emergency beacons get answered on Colonial Authority response timelines, which meant I was looking at 6 to 10 hours. 6 to 10 hours turned out to be 8. I know because I was watching the clock. Mostly because it gave me something to do other than think about what came next. She slept for 3 of those hours, curled small on the bunk. I sat at the monitoring console and ran systems checks and tried to be practical. The Vorin maintenance workers from my crew would come back when the convoy came back. They'd know who she was. There would be someone to call. That was the plan. Very clean. Very sensible. What I did not account for was the Colonial Reclamation Authority. I heard the cutter dock at the emergency berth at hour 8, and I thought, good, help. I was at the hatch to meet them. There were 4 of them. CRA Salvage certification patches, the kind with the little gold border that means they have reclamation authority under Frontier statute. The crew leader was a thin man named Gareth. I know his name because he told me it 3 times in the first 2 minutes, in the way people do when they want you to understand that they have a title attached. He had a survey tablet, and he was already filling out a form as he walked. "We have a reported total loss event at this facility," he said, not looking up. "Under Frontier Resource Management Act, Section 44, all structures, equipment, and biological material at a declared loss site transfer to Colonial Reclamation Authority pending." "There's a child," I said. He looked up, looked past me toward the crew quarters, looked back at his tablet. "Unaccompanied biological, unregistered origin. No documentation. That goes under Section 44, subparagraph 9, unaccompanied minor biological material pending." Something happened in my chest. Not dramatic, more like a relay closing. "She's not cargo," I said. "Sir, I understand this is a stressful situation." "She was placed in that drum deliberately," I said, "by someone who knew what was coming and knew they might not make it back. That makes her a deliberate act of protection by a person who loved her. It does not make her salvage." Gareth had the expression of a man who had done this a great many times and had a procedure for all of it. "Sir, without documentation. I am her documentation." He stopped typing. "My name is Oral Bast, Atmospheric Survey Technician. Colonial Survey Bureau Registration 7 Thenis-44. I have been in continuous presence at this facility since before the storm event. I personally located and recovered this child from a sealed container in the sub-level of this facility. I am formally stating, here, now, to you, that she is in my care. You will note that in your report. Sir, that's not how Section 44. Write it down, Gareth." He was looking at me differently now. People do that when they recalibrate. I'm a medium-sized man in a survey vest, with gray at his temples and instrument calluses on his hands. I do not look like a problem. I had apparently become one. "Even if I note it," he said, "the legal situation is—" "The legal situation," I said, "is that you are 4 people with salvage forms, and I am 1 person with a child and a Colonial Survey Bureau registration. That means I can file a material dispute on your reclamation claim that will take 14 months to resolve. 14 months during which this facility, and everything in it, is in contested status. You don't clear that depot. You don't log those fuel stores. You don't file the asset transfer. You sit on it while the paperwork moves." Gareth looked at his crew. His crew looked at Gareth. "Or," I said, "you note in your report that an authorized Colonial Survey Bureau technician has claimed protective custody of 1 unaccompanied minor located on site, and you proceed with your salvage inventory of everything else, which I will cooperate with fully and cheerfully." The girl had appeared in the doorway behind me at some point. I don't know when. I heard Gareth's crew lead go very quiet. I didn't turn around. I kept my eyes on Gareth. He looked at her. He looked at me. Something shifted in his face that was not entirely about paperwork. He wrote it down. The convoy came back 6 hours later. Devon, one of my Vorin crew, the one who ran the primary filtration checks every shift, and who had once very patiently explained to me for 40 minutes why my calibration technique was wrong. He came through the depot hatch at a run and stopped when he saw her. He made a sound I didn't have a word for. She made a sound back. Her name, I learned, was Sene. Her mother had worked the secondary processing line. Her mother had put her in the drum 4 hours before the storm hit and told Devon's wife what drum and which pillars, and then gone to help get the elderly and the very young out of the settlement camp on the shelf. The camp had made it. Her mother had not. Devon's family took Sene. That was right. That was what should happen. He shook my hand before he left, which for a Vorin is a very serious gesture, and I didn't fully understand the weight of it until later. He held on a beat longer than handshakes usually go, and looked at me without saying anything. And I thought about her mother measuring out exactly how much change she'd need, and bracing those pillars, and running the math on what a sealed drum could withstand. Doing all of that alone, in the hours before a Category 6 came in. Doing it for a stranger, because she had to trust that whoever opened that drum would be decent. I was not a hero. I was the man who stayed because of the barometric array. But I am glad it was me.